The great chamber of the Galactic Council floated in the darkness of space, orbiting a star that had been dying for 1 million years. The building itself was made of crystal that glowed with soft blue light, and inside it, the most powerful beings in the galaxy had gathered to decide the fate of humanity. High Arbiter of the Dominion stood at the center of the room. He was tall and thin, with gray skin that looked like stone and eyes that held no warmth. For 3,000 years, his species had helped rule the galaxy. They had seen empires rise and fall. They had watched young species crawl out of their birth worlds and reach for the stars. Most of those species learned their place quickly, but humans were different. Humans were a problem. Around, representatives from the 12 founding species took their seats. The collective, beings of living metal who spoke in clicks and hums. The communion, tall and graceful creatures with skin like flowing water. The assembly, massive beings covered in thick plates of bone. Each of them had ruled their corner of the galaxy for thousands of years before humanity had even discovered fire. And now, after 300 years of watching and waiting, they had finally decided that humanity had to go. The charges were the same as always: unauthorized expansion, aggressive trade practices, harboring refugee species without permission. Every few decades, humanity did something that annoyed the Council, and every few decades, the Council called them here to answer for it. But this time was different. This time, the votes had already been counted in private meetings and quiet conversations. This time, humanity would not receive another warning. This time, they would be expelled from galactic civilization forever. Looked around the chamber and felt satisfied. The other founding species had agreed. The junior species, the 400 lesser civilizations who held no real power, had not been consulted. They never were. This was how the galaxy worked. The strong decided and the weak accepted. The doors to the chamber opened and turned to watch the human delegation arrive. He expected a crowd of advisors, lawyers, and diplomats, all of them talking fast and making desperate arguments. That was what humans usually did. They talked and talked, as if words could change anything. But only one person walked through the doors. She was a small woman with black hair and calm eyes. She wore a simple gray suit with no decorations or symbols of rank. She carried nothing but a small data tablet, which she held loosely at her side. She walked to the petitioner's podium at the center of the room, and she stood there alone, facing the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Almost laughed. So this was it. Humanity had finally accepted their fate. They had sent one person to receive their sentence, probably hoping that a show of humility might earn them some small mercy. There would be no mercy. Ambassador said, letting his voice echo through the chamber. You stand before the Galactic Council to answer for the crimes of your species. Do you understand the charges against you? I do, the woman said. Her voice was calm and clear. And do you understand that this council has the authority to expel your species from all participation in galactic affairs? I understand that you believe you have that authority. A ripple of surprise moved through the chamber. Eyes narrowed. Is that meant to be a challenge, Ambassador? No, said. It is meant to be a statement of fact. You believe you have that authority. Whether you actually have it is a different question. Felt his patience wearing thin. Humans were always like this. Always talking, always pushing, always refusing to accept their place. The authority of this council is not in question, he said coldly. We have governed this galaxy for 10,000 years. We will continue to govern it long after your species is forgotten. Perhaps, said. But before you render judgment, I request permission to present evidence in humanity's defense. Looked at the other founding species. Several of them seemed amused. The representative made a gesture that meant something like a shrug. Why not let the human talk? It would change nothing. Very well, said. Present your evidence, but know that this council has already reviewed the charges against you. Your words will not change the outcome. We will see, said. She touched her data tablet, and a holographic display appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed a document covered in the formal script of the language. "This is the Mineral Accords of Cycle 4891, said. "A treaty between the Dominion and the Collective, establishing trade rights for certain rare elements in the outer territories." Felt a small flicker of unease. Why was the human talking about a trade agreement from centuries ago? "These accords were scheduled to expire 12 cycles ago," continued. "Under the terms of the original treaty, they required renewal by both parties. That renewal never happened, which means that for the past 12 cycles, the Dominion has been extracting resources from space without legal authorization." The chamber went silent. The representative turned to look at. The clicks and hums of their voice were sharp and angry. "Is this true?" Forced himself to remain calm. "This is a minor administrative matter. It has nothing to do with the charges against humanity." "I think it has everything to do with those charges," said. "Humanity is accused of unauthorized expansion, but it seems that unauthorized expansion is acceptable when certain species do it." She touched her tablet again and the display changed. Now it showed navigation logs, star charts, and sensor data. "This is the conservation fleet," she said. "Officially, these ships patrol the neutral zones to protect endangered stellar ecosystems. But according to this data, which we obtained from multiple independent sources, those ships have been strip mining asteroids in protected space for decades. They have extracted resources worth more than the annual output of 100 inhabited worlds. None of this has been reported to the Council." The representative made a sound like metal scraping against metal. Other delegates began to shift in their seats, looking at each other with new suspicion. Continued. One by one she moved through the founding species. She had documentation for all of them: secret trade agreements, hidden military operations, treaty violations that had been buried for centuries. She did not accuse anyone directly. She simply presented the evidence and let the room draw its own conclusions. The chamber descended into chaos. Species that had been allies began to argue. Old grudges, long forgotten, suddenly came back to life. Called for order, but no one was listening anymore. They were too busy defending themselves, attacking each other, and demanding explanations. And through it all stood at her podium, calm and patient, waiting for the room to settle. When the noise finally died down, she spoke again. "I have one more piece of evidence to present," she said. "This one is about humanity." She touched her tablet and a new document appeared. It was old, written in a formal style that had not been used for centuries. At the top, it bore the seal of the Galactic Council. "This is Council Directive 7 Alpha 9, said. It was issued before first contact with humanity. It classified Earth as a resource reserve, to be exploited once the native species had exhausted itself through internal conflict." The chamber went completely still. "The founding species did not welcome humanity into galactic civilization," said. "They contained us. They kept us in probationary status for 300 years, waiting for us to destroy ourselves. They planned to take our solar system once we were gone." She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of every delegate. "But we did not destroy ourselves," she said. "We unified, we grew, and now we know the truth." She set down her tablet. "We do not ask for mercy. We do not ask for forgiveness. We ask only for one thing: a vote." Found his voice. "A vote on what?" Smiled. "A vote on whether this council has the right to exist at all." The chamber erupted into chaos once more, but this time it was different. This time, there was fear in the voices of the founding species. Watched as delegates shouted at each other, as old alliances crumbled in moments, as centuries of careful political balance collapsed around him. And at the center of it all stood one small human woman, still smiling, still calm, as if she had known exactly how this would unfold. Realized with growing horror that she probably had. "This is madness," he said, forcing his voice to carry over the noise. "The Council has governed this galaxy for 10,000 years. You cannot simply vote it out of existence." "I am not asking the Council to vote," said. "I am asking everyone else." She gestured to the far side of the chamber, where the junior species sat in their lesser seats. 400 civilizations, all of them real power, all of them forced to accept whatever the founding 12 decided. They had always been silent during these sessions, because their voices had never mattered. But now they were not silent. A delegate from the Union stood up. She was small, covered in fine fur the color of autumn leaves, and her voice was quiet but steady. "The Union recognizes Ambassador's right to call for a vote," she said. "We second her motion." Another delegate stood, then another, then a dozen more. Species that had never spoken in council sessions were suddenly finding their voices. Species that had been ignored for centuries were finally standing up. Turned to the other founding species, looking for support, but what he saw frightened him. They were still angry about the exposed mining operations. They were demanding answers about the secret agreements with the founding 12 were too busy fighting each other to present a united front against humanity. This had been planned, all of it. Every piece of evidence, every revelation, every carefully placed word. Humanity had not come to this session to defend themselves. They had come to tear everything apart. "You cannot do this," said, but even he could hear how weak his voice sounded. "The founding species have the authority to override any vote by the junior members. That is the law." "That is your law," said. "A law you wrote to serve your own interests. But laws only have power if people agree to follow them. And I do not think people agree anymore." She touched her data tablet and the holographic display changed again. Now it showed a map of the galaxy, with thousands of lights representing inhabited worlds. And on each of those worlds, a symbol was appearing. A simple mark that indicated one thing. A vote had been cast. "We have been broadcasting this session to every inhabited world in the galaxy," said. "Every species, every colony, every station. They have been watching everything. And they have been voting." Stared at the map. The votes were coming in too fast to count, but he could see the pattern clearly. The junior species were voting against the Council, not just some of them, almost all of them. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "We control the communication relays. We control the broadcast systems. You could not have done this without our permission." "Actually," said, "we could, and we did. For the past century, human engineers have been helping to upgrade relay stations across the galaxy. Better equipment, faster connections, more reliable service. We did good work. The Council was very pleased with our contributions." She paused. "They did not notice that we installed in every system we touched." Felt cold. Humans had been planning this for 100 years. They had been building toward this moment while smiling and bowing and pretending to accept their place. Every upgrade, every repair, every helpful suggestion had been part of a larger plan. "This is treason," he said. "This is an act of war." "No," said. "This is democracy, something the Council has tried very hard to prevent for 10,000 years." She turned to face the full chamber, raising her voice so that everyone could hear. "The Galactic Council has violated its own founding charter. It has exploited junior species, hidden crimes, and conspired against member civilizations. Under the principles that this Council claims to uphold, it no longer has the authority to govern." She gestured to the map, still filling with votes. "The people of this galaxy have spoken. The Council is dissolved." For a long moment, no one moved. The founding species sat in stunned silence, watching their power slip away with each new vote that appeared on the map. Junior species were standing, some of them crying, some of them laughing as they realized what was happening. Made one last desperate attempt. He reached for his console and activated the enforcement protocols. the emergency command that would summon the Council's military fleet to restore order. "The enforcement fleet will end this," he said. "They will blockade this chamber, they will stop the broadcast, and they will remind the galaxy who holds the real power." Did not look worried. "The enforcement fleet," she said, "is not coming." As if on cue, a communication signal appeared on the main display. A face appeared, belonging to an officer in a military uniform. Behind her, through a viewport, could see dozens of warships, all of them bearing the marks of the enforcement fleet. "This is Fleet Commander of the Enforcement Fleet," the officer said. "We have received the emergency protocols from the Council chamber. We have also been watching the broadcast." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was firm. "The Enforcement Fleet recognizes the will of the galactic majority. We will not act against the people we swore to protect. This fleet now serves the new Galactic Assembly, whatever form it takes." The signal cut off. Stared at the screen, unable to believe what he had just heard. The enforcement fleet, the military arm of the Council, had refused to follow orders. They had chosen to side with humanity and the junior species. "How?" he whispered. "The fleet commanders are all appointed by the Council. They are loyal to us." "The commanders are," agreed, "but the crews are not. The ships of the enforcement fleet are crewed by members of junior species, the ones you considered too unimportant to worry about. For 300 years, humanity has been getting to know those crews. We learned their languages. We attended their ceremonies. We married into their families. Their children trained in human academies and learned human values." She smiled softly. "We made friends, High Arbiter. It is something humans are good at." The chamber was silent. The founding species sat in their ancient seats, watching their empire crumble around them. The junior species were already talking to each other, making plans, building something new from the ruins of the old. Looked at, and for the first time, he asked an honest question. "How long have you been planning this?" Considered the question. 300 years, she said. "Since the day we learned what the Council really thought of us. Since the day we found Directive 7 Alpha 9. We knew then that we would never be accepted as equals, so we decided to change the definition of equality." She picked up her data tablet and turned toward the door. "The new Galactic Assembly will meet in 3 days, she said. "Every spacefaring species will have an equal voice. The founding 12 are welcome to join, if they are willing to accept the same rights and responsibilities as everyone else." She looked back at one last time. "We did not come here to destroy the Council," she said. "We came here to replace it with something better. The galaxy deserves a government that serves all its people, not just the powerful few." Then she walked out of the chamber, leaving the founding species alone with the ruins of their authority. 3 days later, a new chamber opened for the first session of the Galactic Assembly. It was held on a station that had been built in neutral space, far from the territories of any single species. The station was not made of crystal or gold or any of the other materials that the old Council had used to display its wealth. It was made of simple metal, functional and clean, designed to serve a purpose rather than impress visitors. The chamber itself was enormous, large enough to hold representatives from hundreds of species. There were no elevated seats, no positions of honor, no symbols of rank. Every delegate sat at the same level, looking at each other as equals. Ambassador took her seat among them. The human delegation was not at the center of the room. They had not claimed any special position. They were simply present, one voice among many, exactly as they had asked to be. Around her, delegates from 400 species were talking to each other. Some of them had never spoken directly before, despite living in the same galaxy for thousands of years. The old Council had kept them separate, encouraged them to distrust each other, made sure they never realized how much power they could have if they worked together. But that was over now. The delegate who had first seconded its motion stood at the central podium. Her name was Senna, and she had been chosen to lead the first session, not because she was powerful, but because she was trusted. "This assembly represents something new," Senna said, her quiet voice carried to every corner of the room. "For 10,000 years, this galaxy was governed by fear and hierarchy. The strong ruled and the weak served. That is over now. From this day forward, every species has an equal voice. Every world has the same rights. We will make decisions together or not at all." There was a murmur of agreement from the delegates. Some of them still looked nervous, as if they expected the old council to return and punish them for their rebellion. But most of them looked hopeful, excited, ready to build something better. "Our first task," Senna continued, "is to establish the basic principles of this assembly. How will we make decisions? How will we resolve disputes? How will we handle threats to our collective safety?" The delegates began to discuss. Ideas were proposed, debated, modified, and sometimes rejected. It was messy and slow, nothing like the efficient tyranny of the old council. But it was honest. Every voice was heard. Every opinion was considered. Participated when she had something useful to say, but mostly she listened. This was not humanity's assembly. It belonged to everyone, and it needed to grow in its own way. After several hours, the discussion was interrupted by an emergency signal. A delegate from the outer territories stood up, her face pale with worry. "We have just received word of a stellar anomaly in the system," she said. "3 inhabited worlds are in danger. The local star is showing signs of instability. If it collapses, billions of people could die." The chamber went quiet. This was the first real test of the new assembly. A crisis that required immediate action, collective resources, and unified command. For a moment, no one spoke. The delegates looked at each other, uncertain what to do. Under the old council, the founding species would have made a decision and everyone else would have followed. But there were no founding species anymore. There was only the assembly. Then slowly, every eye in the room turned toward the human delegation. Noticed the attention and felt a familiar weight settle on her shoulders. Humanity had started this revolution, and now the galaxy was looking to them for guidance. It was exactly what she had hoped to avoid. But she also knew that leadership was not about giving orders. It was about showing what was possible. She stood up. "The human fleet has ships in that sector," she said. "We can begin evacuation operations within 6 hours, but we cannot handle this alone. We need transport ships from the, medical teams from the, and engineering support from the." She looked around the room. "This is how the assembly works. We each contribute what we can. We coordinate our efforts, and we save those people together." For a moment the chamber was silent. Then the delegate stood up. "The Union will provide transport ships," she said. Another delegate rose. "The Communion will send medical teams." Another, "The Collective will provide engineering support." One by one, species began to offer what they had. Some contributed ships, some contributed supplies, some contributed expertise. The old rivalries and suspicions did not disappear, but they were set aside in the face of a greater need. Within an hour, a rescue operation was organized. Fleets from a dozen species began moving toward the system, coordinating their efforts through the Assembly's communication network. It was not perfect. There were arguments and delays and misunderstandings, but it worked. And when the crisis was over, when the people had been saved by the collective action of the galaxy, something had changed. The Assembly had proven that it could function, that cooperation was possible, that the old ways were not the only ways. Watched the rescue operation from her seat in the Assembly chamber. She thought about everything humanity had done to reach this moment. 300 years of planning, centuries of patient work, building relationships, earning trust, waiting for the right moment. Some people might have called it manipulation, but knew the truth. Humanity had not manipulated anyone. They had simply treated people with respect and kept records of those who did not. The rest had happened naturally. The galaxy was full of species who wanted something better. They had just needed someone to show them it was possible. A delegate from a species did not recognize approached her seat. He was small, covered in iridescent scales, and he looked nervous. "Ambassador," he said, "I wanted to thank you. My species was council membership for 2,000 years. We were told we were too primitive, too weak, too unimportant, but you gave us a voice." Shook her head. "We did not give you anything," she said. "You always had a voice. We just helped you remember that." The delegate smiled, and something that looked like hope filled his eyes. Then he returned to his seat, ready to participate in the next discussion. Looked around the chamber one more time. It was crowded and loud and chaotic, full of species who were still learning how to work together. There would be problems ahead. Disagreements, conflicts, maybe even wars. Building a better galaxy would take time. But for the first time in 10,000 years, every species had an equal chance to shape the future. The strong could no longer simply take what they wanted. The weak could no longer be ignored. And somewhere in the vast chamber, among the hundreds of delegates working to solve the next crisis, humanity sat quietly, just one voice among many. Exactly where they belonged,